a purpose of this is to do long tail type discussions, where an expert that works here can talk to the members of our community that are here, parents, staff, and faculty, about their area of expertise, but then it will be out there on YouTube. And I can assure you that I go all around and people will say, sadly, rarely about anything I've said, they'll say, so-and-so said this really important thing about, and it will be a third Thursday from gajillion years ago. Well, the school's only 10 years old, so it can't be gajillion, but a long time ago. I've been looking forward to this particular lecture and begged for the indulgence of giving an introduction, not because anyone who happens to be here right at this moment needs an introduction, but for the people at home. As they used to say when my papa was little, TV land. Out there in TV land, we say hi. It is, for a classical school, impossible to think about the summit of education without thinking about music. Music is, for Plato surely, and for most classical educators, perhaps, and music broadly construed, the sublime human experience and art. And so when we started the school, it was always central to, I know, Kate's vision, to my vision, to all the people involved in starting the school, that music be as good as we could make it. As good as I could make music would be very bad indeed. And so I was lucky to be married to a trumpet player who could get us off to a good start. But what you really are beginning to look for is someone who could understand the enormous value of music to classical education as a paramount art form. To put it simply, the person we're going to hear from tonight exemplifies the ability to put the highest level of human reasoning possible, almost mathematical precision, together with what Plato would describe as the spirited element of the soul. You don't have to think very hard about music to realize it stirs you up to do something very often. With what Plato would have described as the erotic soul, which is a word that unfortunately has changed in meaning, but means something like it's totally physical. And it's the physical need, for example, to eat with other human beings, to experience fellowship, to ultimately, in the great mystics, come to union with God. And music as an art form, its ability to do that. Now, I said all of that to say, I know very few people who can think about this simultaneously and do it. So the worst thing is a philosopher telling you what you should think about a thing, but then I have almost no ability to do this whatsoever. And so that's fairly useless. Lauren Turner, who is the Dean of Fine Arts here, and fine arts really is all of what Plato would have called music, musica. It's everything. Theater would fall under this, for example. Gymnastics, to be perfectly strict, would fall under this. And opera, for example, as the consummate bringing together all of this, we're going to be privileged to hear from a person, I know because I know where she went to school, who intellectually can think about this at the very highest level, but then do it. And the ability to do and think and experience, I commend to you, and I mostly commend to people who are watching this later to Google our speaker, Dean Lauren Turner, and listen to her sing and perform online, because you cannot understand what you're about to hear without understanding what you could hear. And so it's my really big privilege and great honor to get to work for, inside the college, our Dean of Fine Arts, Lauren Turner. So thank you.
Thank you for that introduction. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself. I got a vocal performance degree from the University of Kansas. That was the first degree that I did, bachelor's. And I went to the Eastman School of Music for voice as well. Woo! And then I did a Master's of Sacred Music at the University of St. Thomas. And I am an opera singer by trade. That is what I do. That is what I've learned. That's what is in my bones. That's what is in my body. And when I was hired for this position, John Mueller looked at me and he said, if you become the director of fine arts, you have to remember that you are the director of all of the fine arts, not just music. And I have grown into that so much, and all that I have learned from our teachers, our students in our school has helped me to be a better performer in music, because they do all go together. I had the greatest opportunities for some of the greatest education, but it was not holistic. It did not include the visual arts. It did include a little bit of theater, because opera does include theater, but not an immersion in it, and particularly not an immersion in discussion, which is really what music is. It is a wonderful discussion. It's really what visual art is. It's a discussion. That is what theater is as well. So I'm here today. I'm going to talk to you about a number of things, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about the why we do what we do, and then I'm going to talk to you about the how and the what we do here at Saint Constantine. First, I know that a lot of you might even know a lot of this, and I am so thankful for you guys being here. The other thing I wanted to tell you is that I am going to lecture, yes, but when I was asked to do this, my first thought was like, nobody wants to hear me lecture for an hour. So we are also seated in a little bit of a discussion setting as well, because as soon as I'm done talking about some of this, I do want to have questions, and I do want to have a discussion, because like I just said, the fine arts really are a discussion, and I want all of us to be able to engage in that together. So the very first thing, yes, this board looks a little crazy, and I just realized too, you can't see about half of it because of where I'm standing in front of it, but I'll point some of this out. I want everybody to look at these things right here, and these things are right here are things that we believe at this school, period. Every student is afforded the opportunity to do the fine arts, period. It doesn't matter if you have the money, it doesn't matter if you have the ability that you think you do, whatever it is, you have the opportunity to do it here. Every student is graded on skills because every student has the capacity to learn. Got into a very interesting conversation with a woman that I know and love who has taught math for many years in public school. And she said to me once, no one should get a grade in art, because it's just creativity and feeling. And I love the woman so much I could not argue with her. She's also kind of like a mom, so I was like, yes, ma'am, and then I walked away. But it's simply not true. All of the arts have skills that can be cultivated. And we are grading the students on that here because it means something to work on these things and to get better at them. And the grades help us to understand that. The fine arts are not exclusive from the other educational arts, and I call them all educational arts because, again, the more that I have studied all fine art, math is an art. Science is an art. English, Greek, all of them are arts. A couple of years ago here at a colloquium, we read Leaf by Niggle, and one of the best discussion groups I've ever been in included a number of us realizing that Trisha LaRocca, David Gilbert, what they do in their areas, in the college, in early childhood, they are artists. And they work on their crafts like artists. They think like artists. It's all art. And yes, all of this leads back to God on here, and I can make a grand statement of life is art, life is fine art, but it's true. It really is. And studying the fine arts, focusing on the fine arts here at our school, is something that really helps all of our students to understand that and internalize that. Was there anything else? Okay, didn't have anything else on there. So all the rest of these words over here, it's just all of them. And yes, you'll probably be looking at a lot of those while I'm talking. These are all really positive things that music, visual art, and theater affords anybody who studies them, even if they do it poorly. Even if they do it poorly. Contemplation is a big one. This is something we just talked about in great scores the other day. I had all of the students take a painting, actually an icon that they were looking at, and I said, you have 10 minutes to find 10 things that you observe in this. And they sat quietly looking for all of those things. And it was amazing to see what they picked up on that. Contemplation, memory, of course. We make our musicians here memorize so many things. It's great for their memory. Of course, creativity, strengthening relational understanding. One of the most amazing things about music, visual art, theater is that we're looking at things on a micro and macro level at the same time. You're studying those micro skills, how to hold a brush, right? What your posture should be when you're singing. These are, in some ways, very micro things that when they're all added together, create the macro art that we're all looking for. Community. The arts at our school has created an incredibly unified community. We have a high school where over half of the students are in choir. We have a high school where almost half of the students at any given point are in theater. And the majority of them take visual art as well. It is part of their culture as a high school to do that. And remember, I'm not saying that for the middle school and the lower school, because we've woven that into the education. They don't really have a choice. They have to go do it. But in high school, they actually get the choice to do that. And most of them do choose to do that because it creates such a strong sense of community for them. Human connection goes along with community as well, which also goes along with self-esteem and self-awareness. And this one I love a lot because when they do a great job, they have such a boost in their self-esteem. And I saw that a few years ago, one of the first times we had a concert at Grace, and the choir, the high school choir, just did such a fabulous job. And we came in and we listened to the recording, and they were so proud of the work that they had done. So they had such a boost in their self-esteem, but also self-awareness, because some of them, they don't practice a lot, and they're not the best that they could be at it, and they get called out on it by some of their friends in a very kind way. We have a rule, particularly in the high school, that nobody is allowed to say anything negative or make fun of anybody, or they simply get kicked out. It is not a space where we allow for any of that, but it is a wonderful place to see, particularly in the high school choir. Those are grades 9 through 12. So you have some of those kids who have been in that choir for 4 years. And then you have some of the younger kids who come in, and those upper schoolers, they're gonna tell the younger students what they need to do, how they need to behave. And when they're not doing it, the upper schoolers, the upper grades, they act like leaders. They show the younger students what they should be doing in there. Same is very much true for theater. Very much true. It is a mentorship even within the students there. So neuroplasticity in the brain, it can alter and strengthen that, which I just think is super cool, right? You can actually create and strengthen pathways in the brain just simply listening to music. Ordering of complex thoughts. Managing emotions, observation skills, development of language skills. We're currently doing 2 songs in foreign languages. We're doing Russian, well, Slavonic, and then we are doing a German song and then an English song. And today one of the students went, "We're doing 2 songs in foreign languages?" And I was like, "Yes." She was like, "Why?" And I said, "Because you can, and it's beautiful." So we're working on it, and she has a pretty good attitude now. But nonverbal communication is one of my favorite ones. Observing art, being a part of theater and music, even with music, when we think about it being verbal or auditory, so much of what a performer is doing is actually non-verbally communicating in a lot of ways too. The theater students in the high school, they have to be watching what the characters are doing at all times to be able to respond to it. With that too, way down here I have adaptability, which I also love, because we all know if you've ever been in any kind of performance, they never go the way you expect. There is always something that happens that you have to be adaptable on your feet. And in some ways, as an adult married with children, adaptability is one of the most important things that you can learn. To have an ideal, to work really hard, and then to have it all go out the window in a moment for something that is not your fault in any way, shape, or form. But to be able to adapt to that situation in some way is actually a very beautiful part of our music, visual art, and theater education here. Fine motor skills as well, particularly with visual art, is something that the more that we've gotten into really organizing our visual art curriculum, it is huge to be able to help children who are particularly struggling with their fine motor skills through art. Being able to manipulate clay, being able to draw, to paint these things. It helps our teachers to be able to discuss these things with parents, to be able to see it. And then of course, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but when we get to 5th grade and they have their fiber arts and their handicrafts, that is a huge time for 5th graders to really be able to concentrate on something tactile and physical and quiet their minds while they're moving their hands. That's a really wonderful thing for them to do. So all of these things lead into relationships, attention, and joy. And I will say those three things are really why we do what we do here. Joy is huge. Everyone who takes part of our arts programs here at Constantine, we do it for the joy of it. Now, it's not haphazard. It's not silly, it's not meaningless, it is truly joyful, which is why this then leads again up to God, because we are truly looking for the good and the true and the beautiful, and that's where that joy comes from. Attention is a really big one, and we talked about this in Great Scores the other day with the students. We were talking about how technology is ruining our attention, and they had a lot of great things to say about that. But they kept looking at attention as attention span in time, and I do think that's a very important way to look at it. But the fine arts in particular are one of the best means we have for helping our students to really cultivate a skill of attention in complexity, and looking at problems, at looking at issues, and looking at their own spiritual development, because it's complex. And so taking the time to look at these things, going back to the micro and macro levels, looking at things on a very small level and how they all fit into a larger level, that is so complex, and that takes a lot of attention to detail. Relationships is the other thing. All music is about relationships. Pitches are relational. Time, when you're talking about rhythm, that's relational as well. Of course, you have your text and the musical relationship to the text as well. And of course, whenever you have a performer, what a performer is doing is they have created something that then they are giving to someone else. That performance is a relationship. So really, every part of music is relational, and it is that idea of ordering chaos. If you put 64 high school students in a room, it's chaos. You give them a song to sing and you make something beautiful and ordered out of that, right? So that's a relationship. Same thing with theater. So much of what they do in theater is looking at characters and how the characters relate to each other, how they relate to their character, how the characters relate to their setting, right? Which then helps them as actors to be able to look at themselves and their relationships in a better way. That also goes back to some of these managing emotions and emotional expression that are all on here too. And why do we do all of these things? Well, all of these things we do at our school, we focus on the relationships, we focus on the attention, we focus on the joy, so that our students will hopefully get to heaven when they die, period. We want them to be saints, and we want them to cultivate a relationship with God. We want them to be able to listen to God. And they really can't listen for God's voice if they don't know how relationships work. If they can't attend to things. I talk to the high schoolers, how much do you hear your teacher say, attend to the text, right? If they cannot truly attend, they're not gonna have an easy time listening for God's voice in their lives. Same thing with joy. If they don't have joy, it's gonna be hard for them to seek God, right? So this is the whole why we do what we do. This is not a part of that. I'll tell you about that later. The how we do what we do. I'm going to start with music. And again, not because I'm a musician and I love it more than everything else, but I'm going to start with it because it's actually our biggest and most complex discipline that we have. It actually starts in the nursery. Babies as early as 6 weeks old come in and they have people singing to them. They also hear other babies singing, which is a huge part of emotional development in here. They hear music played as they're dropped off in the morning. So the nursery is actually where they start with music. Then we get into early childhood, which is run by Mandy Atway, and we use Music Garden is our curriculum that we use for that. And Music Garden is a Montessori-based program that we use. It could go up to essentially age 9, and it was really initially intended for kind of a mommy and me parent-child setting. However, because we have such small classes, we're actually able to use it pretty effectively here with one teacher and a few students as well. After that, after we have early childhood, we get into first and second grade music, where we have Sarah Baker and we have Holly Palandro, and they use the Kadai method is what they use. Now, Kadai is a methodology, it's not a curriculum, and the methodology is based on folk songs. And so what we've done is we've interpreted it by using our own folk songs, American folk songs, but also Orthodox hymnody. That is a folk song of our school. Other hymnody is also a folk song of our school, so they use that as well. Then we get into third grade, and at third grade, so many things happen at our school for third graders. They get to go to field day for the first time, and they get to be in a giant choir concert for the first time. We start choir in third grade here, which is a little different than a lot of public schools and a lot of other schools, and it's very intentional. In third grade, they still have a joy for performing, and they're not nearly as nervous around their peers as they get to be when they're in about fifth grade, which is usually when it starts in public schools. So we get in there a little early, just to make sure that they get used to doing these things around each other before all of that sets in. So choir is the bulk of what they have between third grade and eighth grade for music. Although this year we did add a beginning strings class for our sixth graders. The hope of that is that each year we'll be able to we'll add a seventh grade one next year with the sixth graders this year and so on. And that will lead into our orchestra ensemble in the high school. When you get to high school, we have choir, of course, 9th through 12th grade choir. And then we also have a string ensemble. We also have a band ensemble. And then we also have great scores. And great scores is a class where the students don't have to perform. They do, if they're in our high school, they have to perform for at least 2 years in some sort of ensemble, because it is simply good for them to learn how to get in front of people and perform in some way. After that, if they don't find themselves to be performers, they can take great scores for the other couple credits that they need. And great scores is essentially like our great books classes, where we listen to and study scores of great musical works, and then we discuss them. After that, then we of course have our college and faculty choir, and hopefully someday a great scores class in the college. But college and faculty choir is one of the most important things we do here in a lot of ways, because it shows our students that our faculty and our oldest students here are devoted to beauty. They're devoted to pushing themselves to do hard things. And all of the other students in our school get to see that it's not something that ends when you've acquired all of the credits you need to graduate. It is a way of life. Overall, we also say that one of our main points of a music education at our school is to make sure that anybody who leaves our school can sing at church in the capacity that's asked of them. It might be in the congregation. It might be a psalmist. It might be in some other way, but they are somehow active in their church and singing. Visual arts is next. Visual arts also starts in the nursery. Some of the best art that I have is our handprints from my little kids. It actually starts that early. Mimi Campaign pretty quickly takes them in pre-K 3 and 4 and moves up. And I am telling you, most schools with visual art, they're like, my kid made a handprint, it was cute, it was fine. Mimi Campaign helps these children at that micro and macro level to an extent that you would never believe. She looks at every work of art that they're doing and critiques it like a true artist. But she has the maternal and educated knowledge to be able to turn that around to the student and help them get better with their skills. At pre-K 3 and pre-K 4, right? It's hard to get them to do anything. I have a 3-year-old. It's very difficult to get her to do anything. And Mimi helps them to actually refine their artistic skill. But more than that, what Mimi helps them do in early childhood is to see the beauty in the world around them. So much of their time is spent outside. So much of their time is simply an observation. Isn't that beautiful? Why? Those are questions that Mimi asks them. So then we move on from there, and we have kindergarten art, first grade art, and all of these art classes are very much story-based. and very much skill-based. So a lot of what they're learning in the classroom, whether it be their history or the classes that, or the books that they're reading, have actually been woven into the artwork that Mr. Antuzzi, Mrs. Klotz, these people have them do, so that they get to read these stories, they get to learn these stories, they get to interpret them and think about them and then recreate them in the way that they see, which is a beautiful way to help them to internalize the things that they are learning on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So 5th grade comes in and they get fiber arts. And fiber arts is such a wonderful class that people have been really excited about for a number of years. And my first question to the visual artists when we were in a meeting is, I was like, why 5th grade? Why can't they do it all the time? Because it's such a beautiful thing. And our very wise art teachers were like, yes, but do they have the capacity to sit and be able to do these very intricate things with their hands without being babysat or poking their friends with knitting needles or something like that? 5th grade is a great place for this. I have a 5th grader this year, and one of the things that I noticed is all of a sudden he got into 5th grade and he seems way more chaotic than he has ever been before. It starts to happen around 5th grade, that they kind of lose control of their bodies and their minds and themselves. So being able to put that into something physical that they're creating actually really helps them to calm their minds down, even if it's 2 days a week. And then of course they get the joy of having something created as well. 6th grade is sketching, primarily sketching, and that was also my question, why 6th grade? Again, these very wise art teachers said they have to be able to start to look at something and recreate it and notice the nuances, to be able to really attend to the details, which you guys might notice also overlaps with when they start their great books, because that's what they're doing in great books. They're not just reading these stories or listening to these stories and going, yep, oh yeah, I know those characters. They're really starting to tear these stories apart and look at every inch of it and then discuss it. 6th grade and up, particularly 7th and 8th grade, are also grades that we start to get a lot of art critique, where they're actually able to critique themselves and then talk to each other and critique each other's art as well, or critique outside art, which is a huge skill for them to be able to do. I've also often told my grade scores class and my high school class, I don't care if you don't like a piece of music. You can tell me you don't like it, but you have to tell me why, and it has to be thoughtful. And most of the time when you ask them that, they're like, I just didn't really like it. I haven't thought about it. And then once they start to think about it, they actually really like it. Visual art is the same for the middle schoolers as well. Alex Clark is here, and Alex has actually done such an awesome job of helping particularly 7th and 8th grade and really 8th grade to move into a 2D, 3D cycle. So they're doing art that is both 2D and 3D instead of just the 2D, which when she came in, she's like, why is it all flat? Why aren't we doing something else? And again, the students have reacted to that in a way that is insane. They loved their house models that they did. Lydia was so excited to show everybody at the concert in the spring. And she had beautifully made little miniature things that she had put a lot of time and effort into. They love the 3D work. And then of course, when you get into high school, we have Mr. Antuzzi who does studio art. And some of this is actually theirs. I found it in a classroom and I thought, that's not gonna sit in a classroom. You guys can look at it. This is from one of our high school students. So is this. That one over there is one of our high school students that did these works of art. They're exceptionally talented and they have an exceptional teacher that is bringing that out of them. These right here, Alex can help me with this. Is this Miss Donato's? Mm-hmm. Miss Donato's 7th grade. All three of those are Miss Donato's 7th grade. And then this one, I just have to take a moment to brag. This is actually Alex's. Alex created this. So all of our faculty members here, whether they are in music, theater, or visual art, are all exceptionally talented at these things, things that they do. They've given their lives to this. And now they're actually teaching our children. And I am so blessed because it's my children that they're teaching as well. So other than that, we also have, this year, we have advanced drawing with Mrs. Klotz. And I forgot to grab one off the wall out there, but you guys should walk out there and see some of their cathedral drawings when you get out there. They are exceptional as well. And then last but not least, we have theater. And theater at Saint Constantine is not really a class. It's actually 2 classes. It's theater ensemble and it's theater production. But I can't call it a class because it's really kind of a way of life for the high school students. I could use other words, but I'm going to leave it at a way of life is what I'm going to leave it at. These students spend so many hours devoting themselves to creating beautiful things for the rest of our community. And it is truly awe-inspiring. If you have not been to one of their productions, you must go. You are simply missing out on it. Other than that, one last thing I wanted to point out to you guys is where you can see and hear all of these things. So we have our choir concerts. We have 2 big ones. We have a Christmas concert, and that Christmas concert is always a Christmas concert. It is not a fall concert. It is not a winter concert. It is none of that. It is always a Christmas concert. And that Christmas concert almost always has 90% sacred music. When we get together and discuss repertoire, we try to stick to a 90%. Sometimes we have to throw in something fun like the crazy 12 days of Christmas that we did last year. But 90% of it is sacred because it is incredibly important to us as a school to maintain that. The spring concert, it varies. We usually have some sort of theme, and that theme is chosen by the music department as a way of really unifying the music department. It's huge. We have a choir for each grade level, starting in 3rd grade, going up to high school. We have our band ensemble and our string ensemble. It really is quite large. So picking some sort of theme helps us to really unify. And then we discuss those themes with our students. Last year it was drama. And the question is, what is drama? And that was a question we kept going back to in class. And while it was fun for me in the high school, it was interesting for Katie in the middle school. Because middle school and drama, they really go together. It was a lot of fun for her, but also such a great thing for them to discuss what drama really is and what drama really is not, right? Before that, we had themes of joy. We also had themes of beauty. And these are things that, again, are used to discuss in the classroom. For visual art, we started a fall exhibition in November, and then there's a spring exhibition that actually runs at the same time as the choir concert, which makes it a little bit easier for parents to see a lot of art and hear a lot of music at the same time, so they're not running around a lot. We also have a nativity program. The nativity program has always been called the Early Childhood Nativity Program, but it is not just early childhood. It always goes all the way up to 2nd grade, and that was actually started by Hope. So I have to... And Rebecca, yes. But one time I know she just came up to me and she was like, why don't we have a nativity with the little kids? They need to do something. And I was like, yes, they do. And now they look forward to it every year. It is actually very similar from year to year. Last year was the first year we changed some of the music, and the kids, they don't care. They love it. They're so excited to be a part of that. And then we also have a spring musical that they're a part of as well. And then last year, Holly Polandro, who is amazing, did Annie Jr. with 4th and 5th graders. And this year, she is going to do The Sound of Music Junior with students all the way up through 8th grade. So just able to give both the extra musical experience and then also theater experience to students that are not in the high school as well. And then of course, as I just said, the theater has 2 student productions every year. Other than that, you will see art, music, and theater being done on our campus constantly. On South Campus, although we have a fine art program, that is generally our Tuesday, Thursday, it is woven throughout the entire curriculum, even on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. There are a lot of Monday, Wednesday, Friday teachers that use drawing, that use music in their history classes, in their English classes, in their language classes as well. So with that, now you know all the what and how. Do you guys have any questions? This is going to be sad. We're going to have to shut it down if you guys don't. Thank you.
So, if you want to learn something, how do I learn from something that is a nonverbal piece of music? What could I'm setting you up to knock me around. What could I possibly learn from something nonverbal?
So,
see, just feels?
Because you're sitting by Hope. So it's a symphony piece. You go to the symphony and you're saying, what can I learn from this?
Right.
You have so many options there. You have the option to sit and listen. to simply listen, which is learning, right? You are going to be pulling parts of that. Do I hear the brass? Do I hear the violins? Do I hear any of that? Keep in mind that some of that, especially in live performance, is visual as well. What is the conductor doing with their hands? You don't have to have a musical background to go to the symphony and learn something. You simply have to be observant, and you have to lean into that and do more of it. So you have that level of it, that you actually don't need any information at all. And then the other level of it is, how do I prepare for this? And one of the reasons why I love our Great Scores class so much is that I listen to and show them everything in class, because I want to do it with them, because I want to guide them through it. Because I think many people are scared of fine arts, and particularly, symphonic music, orchestral music, opera we were talking about, because it's incredibly intimidating. And they assume that they just don't get it. So most of the time, people don't go. But that's like looking at Demons, the book, looking at that book, looking at something at War and Peace and going, I don't get it. Have you tried? And what skills do you have? Can you read? Your reading skills may not be exceptional. Your deductive reasoning may not be, you might not be able to look at these stories and understand it the same way that you do. Yeah. But that doesn't mean you can't learn something from it. And how do you learn more from it? You study it. You ask other people about it.
Turn off our word self and then I'll be still. But the biggest struggle for me in learning this was turning off my word self, because when I was a kid, all my music teachers taught me to do was to think of a story to go with music, and that was it.
Yeah.
Like, I never learned to listen to music until I got married.
Yeah.
How do we do that? How do we teach kids to do that more relevantly?
I fully believe that, especially with music, that we have to look at it in the grammar, logic, rhetoric stage. And they have to learn the grammar of music, which is knowing note names or pitches, relationships, rhythm, all of those things. It's just like, again, going back to the reading, if you don't know how to read, like actually how to read words, and someone has only spoken to you, well, then you're never going to be able to read War and Peace, right? So looking at it from a grammar perspective and then going into logic. Well, once you've learned all of that grammar, which we really do up until about 5th grade here, and then you get into about 6th grade, and they start to look at logically how the pieces work together. So again, looking at that macro and micro. You have to have some understanding of the micro. But again, open your mind to realize that the micro is not just note names, rhythms, those things. The micro can also be just the observational level of, what do I hear? Is that pitch high? Is that pitch low? Is it really loud? Is it really soft? Is it really loud the entire time, or does it vary in some way? Those are all things that, even if you don't have the specific grammar language that we give here in learning solfege or any of these other things, you do still have a grammar level understanding in some ways that then you need to connect with the logic and then of course the rhetoric as well. I might get in trouble for this, but I often tell the high schoolers that I think that music, singing in particular, and choir is the highest form of dialectic, because it is a conversation, and it's a conversation that they are having on a physical and metaphysical level. And I've had a couple students who tell me, they're like, no, that's wrong. And then a couple who really do agree. It really is a dance, it really is a conversation, and everybody is needed in that. And all of these skills are needed. The grammar skills of knowing what is going on and how that relationship works, but also the ability to simply listen. I think as a culture in general, as a modern culture, we have simply lost the ability to listen. And this also, it does not stay with music, it goes to art. When we were in Great Scores the other day and I had them looking at the icon, part of the reason why some of them had a hard time finding 10 things is because they really weren't listening to the whole thing, which again, that listening I'm going to look at is attention, right? They weren't attending very carefully to everything that was going on there. So I think that refining the listening, you could do the greatest work of turning off the words, ignoring what your teachers had said, and simply sitting, being quiet, receiving something, and listening. And possibly even leaving and not speaking about it, just to let it move within you. So I think that's the first place I would go. Just to add to that, though, I did tell the upper school the other day, I played some opera for them, and some of them started yawning. And I was like, come on. And I asked them all how many of them have been to the opera. And of course, there's a few of them, because like my daughter's in there, and she's forced to go to the opera. And I asked them why they didn't go. And they did actually say, like, it's scary. It's like 3 or 4 hours of sitting there not knowing anything that's going on. And I told them, yeah, I actually have a hard time myself. Don't tell anyone. Wait, it's recorded. I have a really hard time sitting through operas myself if I'm not in them. It's really easy to be in an opera. You are always busy. You are always thinking about the next thing that you're doing. You are always engaged in the story, whether you're on stage or off stage, because you have to know when to go back on stage. So you're always engaged in some way. It goes by when you're in an opera like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and then the next thing you know, it's over. We've gone to operas that halfway through, I'm like, can we go home? I'm really tired. I'm in a cramped chair. I don't know, like, I don't like the soprano. You know, you have all it's hard. And the ones that I like the most are the ones that I know the most about. And so I told my students, if you're going to go to an opera, do not go and just sit there and expect to understand it. It's like going to a foreign country and being like, I'll pick up the language. Yes, to an extent, you'll figure out what bus and bathroom and some of those are pretty quickly out of necessity, but you're not really going to understand it. You do have to learn the language before you go. And I even told my students, this is very much frowned upon, and I was like, buy the score online and look through it, sit there with it. I was like, that's one of the most engaging ways to go to any sort of symphonic production or anything else like that, is to actually have it in front of you and look at it, because you have a little bit more of an idea of what's going on. If it's just happening to you, that's fine. You actually can learn a lot from it. We just talked about that. There is a lot that you can learn from it. It's just harder. It is just harder. So, yes.
So I've heard you say the thing about singing as a dialectic before, and I've always wondered, what questions are we asking as singers?
What questions are we asking as singers to the audience? I think there's so many questions, and it's really going to depend on the piece. Because keep in mind, the piece that we're doing may actually have questions, like, because it has words, right? But then there are also musical questions that are like interwoven into it. How many times have you listened to a choral piece and you're like, yeah, I don't like that? Every once in a while. How many times have you listened to it and you're like, yeah, I really like that? I think there are questions embedded in that, how a performance is done, how it could be better, right? But I think you're really asking them the question of, do you understand me? Do you understand us? Do you understand this? And that this could just simply be the text. That's why, especially in college and faculty choir, a lot of the times we've talked about the text. When we did, now it's escaping me, the French one we did a couple of years ago, Lordson. When we did that, we actually wrote the text up on the board, and we wrote it in different translations. It was a French text. We put it into different English translations and talked about what it meant. Because that's actually one of the biggest parts about performance, is that if the performers don't know what it means, then the audience isn't able to understand what that question is or what that dialogue is, I think. And I think sometimes very unremarkable performances goes back to that. It's a lack of understanding on the performer's part to really understand the text. And another good question, Kate, for that is really, what is the text? Because we talked about this particularly with choral music. You have the text, the words, but the music itself is a text, right? I think it was Bernstein, there's a fun video of him on YouTube where he said, somebody asked him to sort of analyze a musical piece and go through all of it, and he just said, no. He said, I studied music so I didn't have to talk about it, so I could do it. because it is its own language. So in some ways, Kate, the answer to that question is very practical, and I answered some of it, but I think some of it is actually a higher question that I might not even be able to articulate. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes.
Oh, sorry. So at the beginning, you said something that was like caused an impression on me. Essentially, the fact that you're affording the opportunity to do art to all the students.
Yeah.
Right? Number one. Number two, it sounded like there is art in everything.
Yeah.
Right? Everything is an art.
Yeah.
And so, and then the third thing was that, but art requires skills
Yes.
that you have to learn and practice. And
Yes.
so, my perspective is that many children are told, there are art kids, there are theater kids, there are kids, they grow up knowing I'm bad at art, I don't like it, I don't get it, and those are the art kids, and that's not me, and that's, well, I was one of the art kids, so.
Yeah.
But it really is something that, like, I believe that everyone can find a thing that they are good at, right, a thing that they enjoy. So I was just curious, like, is there a strategy that you take? Is it about guiding a student towards, an ability in theater versus like maybe they try to do visual arts and it's not something that they really want to put the time into
Yeah.
or that really works for them, but you guide them towards music, and the
Yeah.
same, or could you speak on that?
There's a few strategies, and the main strategy is force. Because we actually force the younger students to do it for exactly that reason. And I'm so glad you said so many things about that, because that is actually one of the core things that gets at me. I have had so many parents come up to me over the years and say, yeah, my kid's not good at that. And I'm like, what makes you capable of saying that? And the amount of times that same child will come to me and be like, I actually really like art. Or music. In the past, I've had parents like, yeah, they're tone deaf. Really? Do you have a music degree? Most of the time, I've been teaching private lessons for a very long time. I think I've come across 1 or 2 people who are actually tone deaf, and that is actually an auditory processing issue and an issue with the brain. It is not something to do with just ability, right? Or like capability to learn something. It's actually a wiring issue, right? So yes, I think that's huge. But we do actually force them. We force them. I keep saying force, it's not force. But it is woven into what they do from such a young age that they feel free doing it and they have the opportunity to do it. One of the things I'm most grateful for here is how the school was set up that way and how we continue to thrive in the sense that our students get to do visual art and music all the way up through middle school. Many private schools and even public schools, you have to choose. When you get to 4th, 5th, 6th grade, they're just like, okay, so now you can choose theater, music, or visual art, but you certainly can't do both because you don't have time for it, right? We don't do that here. They do both. And now when I talk about the grading, I was actually kind of afraid to put that up there with the grading because it just sounds scary. But the reason why we need that is, and Alex will attest to this, you have so many kids who come in and they're just like, I'm not good at it. And you can actually look at them and say, okay, this specific skill that you've been working on, you were here and now you're here. And she's doing that grading. Grading is communication to the parents and to the students in that sense, right? So she has that communication factor. So even students who say, I'm not good at it. And you know what? I do think people are just inclined towards arts and different things, just like we all have our own aptitudes to do anything at all. Funny thing, can I tell you, I don't actually think mine's music. Like, I think I just found it and I kept cultivating it. And at one point I was like, this is what I do now. And then I kept working on it. I'm not sure if I'm actually the most naturally musically inclined. I thought I was terrible at art, and a number of years ago, I actually just started doing it. Actually, I started doing it a lot during Hurricane Beryl, because we were displaced from our home. And I took some oil pastels with me to our friend's house that we were staying with, and I just started drawing a picture of our house. And my kids think I am so talented, and they love that picture, and they love that picture because it represented what they saw in our home. It wasn't to scale. The sun is massive, like right behind the house. So there's a lot of things about it that I need to work on as far as the skills go. But our kids were so excited to see that. And then the best part about that is they all sat down and asked if they could do it too. Every single one of them, even the ones that aren't inclined towards it, right? Because it was a community thing that we were doing as well. You just said it earlier, because you said, I shouldn't be a part of anything. There's no room for me in an opera. And because I respect you, I was like, But I did say something else. But it's simply not true, especially in an opera. There are so many things. If you look at an opera, there are the singers, there are the stage directors, there are the stage hands that are working behind the scenes to simply get curtains in and out. I say simply, if we did not have those people backstage, you would not see us on stage. We need that help to get on. At the end of a production, the amount of us that are just hugging set crew, because we're like, no, we literally could not do this without you. You have stage designers. You have the orchestra, you have the conductor, you have the choral director for, say, the choir, you have the coaches for the singers, you have the rehearsal pianists for them. You also have the people who market it, right? There is so much that is related to that there is room for everyone somewhere in there based on their skills and what they're inclined towards. Most operas have some form of dance and ballet. You even have that in their set design, all of that kind of the set creation. There's all of that in there. So there certainly is a way to be a part of the arts in that sense, regardless of how naturally inclined you are to it. And most of the time, people simply don't know. It really is a cop-out. They just don't want to put the effort into it. Or worse, they've simply been told they shouldn't put the effort into it because it's not worth their time, because it's not who they are.
What you said about the parents, like, and I'm not someone who knows a lot. I don't know anything about music. It's a mystery to me. It's amazing. But it's a friend of ours who was a music teacher, and she left this career because of the parents, because of the parents pressuring their children, calling her, why isn't my son doing better at this, and the pressure that the students felt like they couldn't enjoy it. Maybe they didn't like playing their instrument. And so it was that, right? A parent saying, my son is tone deaf, my daughter is tone deaf, like, it's that same thing, right? It's
Can I just have you step back, like, think about that and think about what that's like for the child? Because what they're hearing their parents say is, like, you're not good at this, period. And you teach private lessons. The jump that you see in students from one lesson to another that is huge, that no one else will ever be able to notice who doesn't teach trumpet, is something that really only you in some ways can share with that student until a certain point, right? If a parent doesn't see that because they see a kid squeak or have some issue on stage, they're gonna look at that teacher and that student and be like, well, you guys messed up. And that's simply not the case, because the work that was done in the process. And that is something that I think is just incredibly hard, whether it's visual art, theater, or music, because you can have a beautiful process. I tell my kids this all the time. If you work hard now, the chance that it's going to be an awesome production at the end goes way up, but it's not guaranteed. There are so many things, especially with singing, it's a human instrument. You could simply be allergic to something and have phlegm in your throat and a note will break. And it doesn't mean you're bad. And it doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing. The same thing is true for art. You can be working on all of these things and then it can get messed up in the end, right? Something can be off that, at least for you, artists, you'll be like, it's ruined, right?
Blown up in the kiln.
Yeah, well, there you go.
the adaptability, right?
Or it all gets thrown away, or we thought it did. Remember when we thought all the things got thrown away because it was found art that was made out of like cardboard, and we were like, oh no, they threw it away, right? Practicing detachment is what we talked about in that, right, from one's art. So yeah, I think that's.
I now want to hear what you would say, because if a parent talks to me about this, and they kind of know what I think, so they sometimes dodge me on this.
Yeah.
We're really into what used to be called the cult of the amateur. We think, I learned to play recorder in 2nd grade and I played it the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And no one should pay to hear me play recorder, but I've gotten a lot of joy out of it.
Yeah.
What's the difference between the cult of the amateur, where, by golly, John Mark played the recorder, and man, you're just not very good, so we shouldn't have to listen to you.
Yeah.
or you should be better. Like, just because you're not professional doesn't mean you can be as lousy as you actually are. It feels like there's a tension there between grading someone and this kind of joyful embrace of, well, I'm never going to be a professional,
Yeah.
but I'm going to play this tenor recorder for the joy of it.
I think in the end it goes back to purpose of what purpose it serves. And we actually talked about this before the Order of the Spear ceremony, because we didn't have all of our forces for that. A bunch of people were gone on a retreat. Some of our best singers were, right? You weren't there. You just weren't there. And so we didn't have a ton of people, and it wasn't going to be the best performance we ever had. And one of the questions I asked, we practiced a lot, and it was actually pretty good. It was actually pretty good for what we had, but it wasn't exceptional, and it wasn't the same thing that the college and faculty choir will put on at a Christmas concert or anything else, because of who was there and what we had to work with, right? And I asked the students, what is the purpose of this? What is the purpose of the college and faculty choir singing at the Order of the Spear? And they said, to beautify the ceremony. Period. And so what we did in there in that rehearsal is we beautified what we could do to beautify the service. So I really think the intention and the purpose which it serves is a huge part of that. If your purpose of learning an instrument is to perform and make money, but you're bad at it, there's something wrong with that. You haven't fulfilled your purpose, correct? You haven't worked towards that in the right way.
Yeah.
When you were describing that, and I thought, if whoever that was, if their purpose was to have a more beautiful life and do something fulfilling, playing the recorder for your life is amazing. That's a great way to do that. Hurrah, you win. That's what it's for you, right? And for that situation, I think.
Is that worth doing?
Is that worth doing? Absolutely.
When are you just bad and you should think, I really should get better because I'd be more joyful?
If you are working towards something and you are actively working towards it, you will get better, period. I teach a lot of private students. Think about writing papers. The students that go, I'm just bad at this, or I can't get any better, they stop trying, is what they do. There's a lot of room in that, right? Like there is somebody's ability, but there is also just the work. The amount of times I have a student, I actually have it in my private lessons thing now, that if you come in and you have not practiced, I will kick you out. Because for my private lessons, you have to practice, because you're not going to get better. You will. I tell all my students, you will get better if you come in here once a week for 30 minutes and you sing through something. By the end of the semester, you will have something to put on, and it will be okay, and it will be better than you started with. But if you don't practice, or if you do practice, you're going to get so much further along. And I will tell you, I have never had particularly a private lessons student, it's just easier to assess with a private lesson student, who wanted to do better, who simply could not. If they practiced, they did, period. And that even goes for the people who say that they're tone deaf. They come in. I've actually had a number of people. I teach some of the seminarians. I go up to the seminary and help them. I've had a lot of deacons. I've had a lot of priests that will come to me because they have to sing, right? Like it's a part of their job. And some of them are kind of almost seemingly tone deaf, but it's generally because they're not really listening and they're not really trying. And simply taking the time to attend to what they're doing, they get better. Yes.
Do you?
Oh, yes. Who? Yeah.
Me.
You.
Maybe going a little bit beyond your talk, but sometimes I think about just how much the consumption of music has changed in like 300 years.
Yeah.
And how something that would have been completely inaccessible outside of a live performance is now like background music.
Oh, yeah.
And it, I suppose if you really think about it, it sort of happened a little bit for, at least a little bit for visual arts too, because it is also
Exactly,
very similarly
yes.
accessible. Like in college, we bought old art books from half-price books, and we would tear out the pages to decorate the apartment.
Yeah.
Because we wanted to be cheap. And I guess, what do you think that just speculating, what might that do to attention, or how do we have to adjust
Yeah.
our attention based off of just not really understanding what it is that we have?
First off, there's two things. The first thing, I think all of that is a result of a lack of purpose, of people not understanding the purpose of it and simply seeing the purpose of only being something aesthetic and not something that requires an attention. How do we take steps towards that? Well, simply great books, or great scores. That is a class that we did exactly this. When I told the students find 10 things in 10 minutes, they took a long time to, that whole 10 minutes, they could have taken the entire period. They really could have done that. And we stopped and I asked them, the last time you walked past one of the beautiful pictures on our walls in our school, did you take 10 minutes to look at it? No. I said, have you come across a picture in a book that you took 10 minutes to look at? No. When was the last time you took 10 minutes to look at a piece of art? Which feels like an eternity to most people. And they said, only if I go to the museum. And then actually one of them piped up and said, you know what, I don't even do that either. I just walk past it. I just keep going. I just want to say I did it. I just go through, I just do it, right? And the same is true with music. In great scores, one of the things I tell them is I say, by the end of this class, your job is that when you hear music anywhere, you attend to it. Even if it's background music, because the majority of the music that the kids hear is background music. It just is. And I said, you need to attend to it, even if it's pop music. There's a lot to attend to. Less so than maybe opera or the symphony, but there's still things that they can attend to in that, right? And we've just gotten out of the process of attending and just being entertained and just being distracted. A lot of times that art is not something that they dive into, it's something they're distracted by, right? Same thing with the music. It's just something to distract you while you're shopping or while you're stuck in traffic. It's not really something that you should be paying attention to. Because most of the time we're told you can't because you don't have the skills, because you didn't go to a fancy music school, because you didn't learn Kadai in first and second grade. So like you're not capable of it. So move on, enjoy it, let it wash over you, and don't think too hard about it. But when you think about it, isn't that what we do with literature? Yeah. There's so much literature that we do with our students that we're like, in public schools, don't try War and Peace. I keep going back to that because it's big, but don't try War and Peace because like you're probably not gonna get much of it. So certainly don't think about Plato because you're not gonna understand any of that. That's a waste of your time. If you wanna understand that, that's going to take you hours. Yeah. It should.
I've heard college presidents say the same thing about algebra. Like,
Yeah.
you can dismiss anything.
Yeah.
Just like,
A lot of people habitually tell children, other people, like, that's too hard for you, that's not for boys, that's not for girls, that's not for you, it's not for you.
Yeah.
Don't worry, it's not for you. And it's like one of the most terrible things that
Exactly.
people do.
Or they look at the purpose again. What is the purpose for that? Well, the purpose is because you're going to become an engineer. So you're not going to become an engineer, so you don't need that. Well, no, the purpose is so that you can understand relationships. That's what the purpose of calculus and trigonometry and all of that is. The purpose of that is so you can attend. And frankly, when you do those things, there's a lot of joy that comes out of that when you're able to see those connections, right? That's the purpose of it. And so going back to that, even a lot of times people will say, yeah, I learned piano at one point. I studied this, I did that, but I didn't do anything with it. And I just think, but you did. And you don't know that you did, because that has actually taught you how to look at nonverbal communication. It builds your observational skills. It changes the neuroplasticity in your brain. All of those things are happening whether you know it or not. And it is something that you've worked on that will never leave you. It will never leave you. Taking the time to learn an instrument, working on that skill is never going to leave you. It'll get rusty, just like languages. But it's something you've learned and that you've done, and it's not going to leave you. You can't get rid of it.
Does folk music still exist? As folk music?
Yes. Define folk music.
I'll try.
Yes.
Indigenous music not produced for money that is widely shared by a group of people.
In that case, I would say yes in the church. And it is hymnody, And when we look at it, a lot of hymnody really has become our folk music. Even so much at our school. It is truly meet and right, right? That is something that is a song of our people here that was created for worship and for, like, not for our community, but for our community in that sense, right? So I do think that that is folk music. I went through a period where I thought, I kind of went out of the box and I thought maybe Taylor Swift was kind of like our new folk music in a way, meaning that it was like representative of the people and sort of trying to get in with it, but no.
Yeah, it feels like it doesn't fit the definition.
It doesn't fit the
Just
definition.
worked
Yeah.
For at least 20 seconds on.
Yeah. So I do think it exists, but I think it exists. And then, of course, we do still have like American folk music that may not be modern, like that we're creating right now, but that is still passed down. And a lot of that music is also being reimagined. Because even think about in the Orthodox Church, the Appalachian melodies, all of that that's going. So we still have it, and now it's actually being reimagined in a different way, which is super cool to think about how you can use music for that.
Yeah, the
Right?
Hillbilly Thomas.
Yeah, there is. So it is still there. And it,
I was in Nashville last week, and there's live music everywhere.
yeah,
But I was actually really, like, at the particular place that we were, I was really impressed by the musicians.
yeah,
Because it was like an open mic night, and they're just folk musicians, and
Yeah.
they were really good, and they weren't getting anything out of it. They
Yeah.
were just there for the joy of playing, and it was lovely.
The one thing I pointed on here, I didn't say, but I actually wrote it in bold, was humility. Because so much of the arts really requires a humility, whether it is for performance like that. And I like that you also said live music. And that goes back to a little bit what Katie was saying, because live music has really taken, we've taken a toll with live music. And there's lots of good reasons for that and bad. Like even looking at opera, when opera got recorded and put into movie theaters, it was pretty cool because I could go see people, even some that I knew, on a giant screen. And it was beautiful and it was awesome. But it takes so much out of that. And I can tell you from every performer that I know, so much of that has killed the experience of being on the stage. Because everybody wants a flawless recorded performance because they can have it because of recordings, visual and otherwise. But can I tell you something? They're almost never that way. There is always, if you go to the opera, somebody's voice will break, somebody will trip, somebody will slide on something. And that's the beauty of it. And that's where we all have to have a certain level of humility to the art, to what we are doing, and to God, to know that, like, we're not in charge of that. We really aren't. We're in charge of as much as we can be, but then in the end, we're really not in charge of it. But having it recorded and continuously listening to and experiencing music really only through the recording is kind of like interacting with a picture in some ways, because it's not live, right?
Theater and music are different from, like, the finished work is here.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see how much went into it.
Yeah.
And that is the fourth iteration.
Yeah.
It was torn up 3 times before this.
Yeah.
They are all part of it. You see the complete product happening in front of you, right? You're not
Yeah.
seeing all their training, their practice and all that, but
Yeah.
the session it can have errors, it can have, what the term you use, right? Like, you have to make it up as you go. It's different.
And there's a
this.
beauty in that because you have something tangible, right? And it's so beautiful to have something tangible, but it's so beautiful in another way to have something that's not. When a performer gets up and performs something and gives it away, it's gone. It will literally never be recreated the same way again. Even if you try to do everything the same way, it'll never be the same way again. And that's why I think a lot about that dialectic and that conversation, is because that conversation that's had in a great books class will never be the same. And a student should never be absent, ever, unless they're dying, because that conversation would not be the same if they're not there. It is a different conversation. So yeah, live music. Go to live music. Again, in grade scores, I always make them write a paper and I make them go to a live music performance, and they're like, but could I listen to it? No. Go. Can I go to a pop? No. Like, yeah, go to that, but go to the symphony. A lot of them will go up to Rice. It's great because Rice will have student performances. And Beckett a couple of years ago was hysterical. He went to it, he hands me this paper, he's like, I really like that. And then he walked away. And I was like, and I talked to Pam about it later, and she sent me an email, and then I talked to her, and she said, thank you so much for making him do that, because he never would have done it.
Yeah.
He never would have gone and done it on his own. And she was telling me how much he raved about how much he liked it afterwards. And that was a really cool one because it was undergrad, so they were real close to his age. And Beckett's so talented. And so getting to see other students that are really refining those talents and live in front of you is really meaningful. Okay. Yes?
So you mentioned asking the students when's the last time you sat and looked at the painting for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Going back to what you were talking to John Mark about as far as what you can do if you don't know anything about the music when you're sitting there, what advice would you, or how is that attention developed by just sitting and the looking without having all the grammar or all the training, or what are you telling your students?
Can I be really humble in front of you right now? The picture, the icon that I printed out, I knew nothing about. I didn't know the artist. I didn't know what it was. I had no clue, which is part of why I did it with the students, because I wanted to see what I knew of it, right? I handed it out. One student, I'm not going to use names just in case they're embarrassed, but one student got the fewest number of things. One student got 10. I think maybe another one did. But the smallest number was 4 he got. And when we went around and started discussing all of it, it turns out he knew almost everything about the painting. Like, he knew what it was, he knew what it was depicting. It was the presentation of Mary in the temple. And he was able to describe why there were 2 Marys there, why there were all of these things. They were looking at the halos. A lot of it is guessing, right? Because we didn't know why they were doing these things. We didn't know why they had the gold halos. We didn't know why all of the women had closed-toe shoes and all the men had open-toed shoes. We didn't know any of that, but we were just taking in information. We were taking in data, and then we were discussing it. And it actually helped all of us in that room with whatever we came with, whatever background we came with. It turned out that student actually really loves visual art. I asked him afterwards, I was like, is this a thing for you? And he was like, yeah. He's never really done it here before. He doesn't do it. He doesn't create as much for whatever reason. I didn't get into that with him, but he loves observing it. And I asked him why. I was just like, why? I will tell you all who it is later. But I was like, why do you like this so much? And he said, it puts into words the things that I can't, or it puts into picture the things that I can't put in through words, and I can understand it that way. And I was like, whoa. So to that point, there is an understanding that I think that sometimes we can't even put into words that art allows for us, just like Bernstein said. I learned it so I didn't have to talk about it, right? Yeah.
Isn't that like the kid who knew all, the icon,
Yeah.
because knowing got in the way of his experiencing in some ways? Because knowing the grammar can sometimes limit us from allowing it to move our heart if
Yeah.
we know how it ought to be. Or so it's sort of like going from the head to the heart, right? We can experience art. If I was an artist, I might see the flaws in a composition. or
Exactly.
in the literature and the piece of music where that mistake might sort of just be exactly what I need to experience in that moment.
Exactly. And I'll say one of the coolest things about having that setting, there's like 9 kids in that class, is that he had so much knowledge about, well, it was more just iconography in general that he had a lot of knowledge about, but being able to, in a human connection, in a community, discuss that. And then you have other students who actually, they really didn't know anything at all, but they picked up on a lot observationally. And to be able to have that conversation where they're really learning from each other with what they bring to the table, I think was the most meaningful part of that entire thing, is that to an extent, all of us were guessing, but some of us had more information than other ones, and we were able to put it all together. Real quick, I don't know what time it is. This little thing, I just realized that I put this up here and I never talked about it. Competitions are for horses, not artists. We often get asked, when are you gonna do competition? Are you gonna do some competitions? And all of the different disciplines look at that differently. Theater said no. They just don't ever want to do it because they don't want the students ever looking at their art as something that should be, graded by somebody and given a number and a letter and whatever else. Also, we do things weirdly. Literally, if you look at the syllabus, if you look, oh, this is the other thing. This is our fine arts, music, visual art, and theater curriculum overview and scope and sequence. This is not bound yet, but actually theater just gave me theirs. So we literally have this for every one of the, we have on theater, visual art, and music, and it explains everything in here. If you look at theaters, Laura made a beautiful pie chart. I knew she could do it. And it shows all of the different aspects of why they learn theater, and then it shows that it's all for their relationship with God. That's what it is. I don't know of any competitions that are going to take that into account, right? And so that's just something that, at least with theater, we're not going to do that. Visual art, we've decided we might do it, we might not. It really depends on how we feel. And what money we have, because they all cost money too. But it's something that we're looking towards. And then also with music, we did one last year. I entered the upper school choir in a competition, and they got 4th place, which is wonderful. I haven't told enough people about that. I do have to say it was hysterical. Claire Segura looked at me as I said this in choir, and I went, and I don't think it was out of 5. Like right when I said it, and she said the same thing to me. I was like, I think there were plenty more than that. But we got 4th place, and that's great. They love that they had an accomplishment for that. But I'll tell you, the comments I got back, some of them were really silly. And that was part of me. I was like, I'm not sure. Competitions might be for horses and not artists, because some of what happened did not come through in the recordings. One of the recordings was actually pretty bad. It was from my phone. And that's not going to show all of the work that they put into it, right? And sometimes that's not worth telling a student or discussing with a student, because they're not able to understand that. Sometimes it is, because it helps them to work towards something else. So, any other questions? Again, I have no idea what time it is. It could be midnight.
It is, in fact, midnight.
Great. It's 8:30? Is it about 8:30?
22.
Nice. Did you have a question? We have 8 minutes.
What can we do as parents and families to encourage the arts? So, like, let's say the parent who is a scientist and is like, I'm not artistic at all. Like, can we talk as a community to be like, doesn't matter, you should buy a ukulele and try it?
Yeah.
And how we can be examples of that to the student.
The way you do it is you're Mrs. Sikora and you join faculty choir. She joined this year. She's been asking me for years, or telling me for years that she's going to do it. You're Trisha LaRocca and you join faculty choir. You do it.
Yeah.
You are me, and we're going to do a Pinot and painting thing, and I'm going to go paint. I'm not good at it, but I'm going to go do it, right? And then also finding ways to integrate that. Mrs. Gravon actually had me come in. She had a spectrograph or something with looking at wavelengths, and I sang into it. And so they were actually able to see what the human voice looked like on that. And I went into her classes, and so that kind of crossing over. Also, when I teach my private lessons, I tell my students, and even sometimes in college and faculty choir, I see myself as a musical scientist. When I teach music, I look at it from a scientific perspective. Like, I actually really have to look at everybody, even posture, right? And I have to take in all of this data. So I actually see myself as a creator, as a musician, as an artist, but I do actually see myself as a scientist more than anything else.
I mean, could you say that it is so important also for the fact of we're raising families upon families upon families? You're teaching children the creation of, like, motherhood, fatherhood, of, that creativity and gender, like, making life, right? Like,
I said it at the beginning, and I meant it.
Yeah.
All life is art.
Truly.
Leaf by nickel. Like, all life is art. It really is. And it helps them to look at whatever they decide to do. Like, yes, you can be an anesthetician. Is that the right word? There's an art to it. When I had my 6th baby, my husband will tell you, my epidural fell out halfway through, and it was the worst pain I've ever been in my life. And all of it was one of the worst experiences ever. We're home a week later, and my husband looks at me and he goes, you know what? That guy did not have a classical creative education. And I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, what? I was so angry because I was tired. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, well, what he did is you said a few things. This hurts, this happens. And he went down the list of things that he kind of thought it could be, and then he gave up. And he didn't think about the problem creatively, which ended up being the easiest thing in the world. Like, maybe look at her back and see if it's in there, that kind of thing. But really, it helps to whatever you decide to do. whether it's teaching, whether it's medicine, they are all arts. And they have to be cultivated that way. And the best way to do that is also to immerse yourself in the fine arts so you can really learn that process, I think. Yeah. Anyone else? Thanks for talking to me, because it would have been boring if I lectured just for an hour and a half. So it was great to have your guys' questions. Thanks for being here. If you have any more questions, you can always reach out to me. Again, this hasn't been like published yet, mainly because I'm working on organizing the words. As it turns out, visually and musically, I'm really creative and gifted. But I'm not with like putting words on paper in a very understandable way. I'm gonna give it to Emily Gillum, because she's fabulous at that. But once that's done, it'll actually be bound. Talk to Jane about having it bound, and it'll be something that is available for everybody to see. And again, it has the curriculum overview and the scope and sequence, so then our parents do know exactly what they're working on. And it does take some of the mystery out of it, that it's not just them going to color or just singing folk songs or whatever they see. They can actually see the very granular minutia, the specific skills that they're working on. But then these documents also have the overview of why we do it as well. So if you have any other questions, I do have the documents, so you can look at that or ask me questions.